right. So I'm here to briefly explain the Safe and Sound protocol. I'll be calling it the SSP for short going forward. And so a few things I need to explain as the context, as the background before I get into kind of actually what the SSP is and how it works. So first I want to explain very, very briefly just polyvagal theory, right? The SSP is based off of polyvagal theory and interacts directly with your vagus nerve. I want to explain that. I want to explain then how your ears are connected to your nervous system from this lens, because that's the route that the SSP is interacting with your body, with your nervous system. And then I just want to get into the logistics, the technicalities and logistics of the SSP, kind of what it literally is, and then how you train it at home, how much time it takes, what it costs, et cetera, et cetera. So first, the brief overview of polyvagal theory. So polyvagal theory is not a psychological theory. It's a medical theory. It's a physiological theory based out of research done in hospitals and in other places over many time by a guy named Dr. Stephen Porges. It happens to, and this shouldn't be so surprising if you really think about it, happens to map perfectly onto a psychological map of someone's experience. And so basically, polyvagal theory it's talking about the vagus nerve, which is one of the cranial nerves. It's the longest cranial nerve. Um, but it doesn't just talk about the vagus nerve. It talks about the different clusters and the different kind of constellations of nerves and nervous system activity in different states. And those three states are hierarchical. And the top of the hierarchy is called the social engagement system. Next is fight flight. Beneath that is freeze. So polyvagal theory actually separates fight, flight, and freeze, where, historically, so to speak, that isn't separated. What are the three distinct states, and why is the hierarchy important? And it'll make sense afterwards why this is necessary to understand in order to have the proper context to understand what the SSP is. So social engagement system is what I'm in right now, what I assume, what I hope you're in right now as well, whereas I feel calm, but I'm also focused. I feel safe, so I'm not in this kind of threat detection, scanning the background for threats type of posture. A lot of the nerves of my face are activated, so my face doesn't have that dead look, or it doesn't have that like kind of frozen in terror look. It doesn't have that, you know, angry or threat or anything look. It's a pretty neutral, I hope somewhat inviting face, because that's social engagement. I'm in a position to be socially engaged in terms of my nervous system. Beneath that is fight flight, and that's kind of classic, trendy fight flight that everyone talks about nowadays. That's basically that, right? That's your body has detected a threat, a perceived threat. It doesn't necessarily have to be an actual threat. Your body's perceived a threat, real or not, and the only response to a threat is either fighting it or fleeing from it. Because threat, as far as your body's concerned, is a life or death threat. It doesn't matter if it's a lion standing 10 feet away trying to eat you or some kind of awkward social faux pas. Your body, if you're anxious, if you're in that fight flight state, responds the same way in terms of the physiology. Okay, and beneath that is freeze. Freeze happens when you've been in fight flight for whatever X amount of time, and for whatever reason, your body determines, okay, we can neither fight from this threat, nor can we flee from this threat. Our only option basically is to shut down, is freeze. That's getting into more like the clinical depression type of state, or more like a dissociative, depressive type of state. And that's playing possum, playing dead. You have just kind of run out of any alternative besides shutting down. So this is a hierarchy, meaning in order to get back up to social engagement, which is ultimately where we want to be, we have to go, and let's say you're in freeze, you have to go freeze, fight, flight, social engagement. You can't jump from the bottom to the top. You can't jump from freeze, skip fight, flight, and arrive back at social engagement. And also, if you're in fight, flight, you can't just really turn it off. You kind of can, but you still have to go through to a certain degree whatever is happening to get back up to social engagement. Right? We can't just kind of pretend that those resources, those bodily resources were called up and then we don't do anything with them and they just disappear. That's not necessarily true. We have to work with them in some we have to acknowledge them at the very least. And this is true from a psychotherapy perspective. This is true from a psychophysiology perspective. This is just true. So that's a very, very brief overview of polyvagal theory and mapping it onto just the psychology. So one more note on polyvagal theory, and less on polyvagal theory, actually more just on, why does your body perceive a social, why is your body responding the same to social anxiety as it does to literal life or death, seeing a lion 10 feet away from you type of situation. So, evolutionarily, think back, even as humans, not so many generations ago, but certainly, monkeys and other primates living in the jungle, right? If you do something or somehow you're socially ostracized, if you're socially excluded from the group and you're in the jungle, that is a life or death situation, right? That is a death sentence. You cannot survive as, an individual primate in the jungle. You need the group, you need society, so to speak, in order to survive. So, our nervous system, and this kind of gets at the language of polyvagal theory, the social engagement system, our nervous system, in addition to just, literal immediate life or death threats, a lion 10 feet away trying to eat us, it helps us navigate social situations. That's how you can walk into a room and you kind of feel the vibe, quote unquote. That's not woo woo. That's your nervous system is reading, is adapting to other people's nervous systems via many of your sensors, not kind of some mystical, magical thing. It's reading facial expressions, reading body posture subconsciously. You can also do it consciously, but it happens regardless of your awareness of it. Um, and just sensing via our multiple senses and faculties, sensors and faculties, the vibe, the state people are in. And so another way to think about this is, why are yawns contagious? What is a yawn? A yawn is a spontaneous diaphragmatic, deep belly breath. That is a physiological sign of calmness. If there's actually a lion 10 feet away from you, there's no way you're taking, you're yawning. There's no way you're doing a spontaneous deep belly breath. You're actually doing the exact opposite. You're doing the physiology of stress, which is rapid, shallow thoracic or chest upper body breaths. Because if you're running, that's how you're breathing. If you're running away from the lion or you're fighting the lion, you're breathing rapidly and thoracically, or meaning with your chest. So, when someone else yawns around you, there's a cue of safety. And now we're getting to the language of polyvagal theory as well, cues of safety. Your nervous system reads that in the other person, and so you feel safe also, and you kind of mimic that, you mirror that, and you receive their safety or their cue of safety upon yourself. It's a little bit clunky language, but that's the idea more or less. So now I want to discuss SSP, the Safe and Sound Protocol, based on polyvagal theory. The way it works is it's stimulating slash exercising your inner and middle ear structures. So why are the ears interacting with our nervous system? Obviously, every part of our body interacts with the nervous system in some fashion, but why specifically the ears? So let's take an example of walking into a cafeteria or some crowded, kind of public space where let's say there's 100 people in the cafeteria, and maybe you've had this experience, or I certainly have. Most of my clients who have deal with anxiety, I've had this experience where you walk into that. Let's just go with the cafeteria, and you're walking next to someone. I'm having a conversation with them outside. I'm outside. It's just him and I talking. I hear his voice pretty okay. The moment we walk into the cafeteria, I can't really distinguish his voice from the background din of voices, of that collective kind of low tone, low frequency, just background din of noise. What happens there when I all of a sudden can't distinguish his voice right next to me? He's 2 feet away from me, but I'm almost hyper aware of the just cacophony of background noise. So our ears, just like all of our senses, um, help us navigate the world, and they help us survive if our system detects a threat. Right? And so if we're in a threat detection state, if we're maybe, fight, flight dominant or sympathetic dominant or chronically anxious or happen to be more anxious at that moment or whatever the case might be, our ears are more attenuated in that state to hear threat signals versus safety signals, right? If my system has detected a threat, it's more important that I am aware of the threat noises, of the threat signals. It's not just noises, it's visual perception, it's thought patterns, everything gets geared towards threat detection and threat mitigation, right? Fight, flight, those are mitigating a threat. And it's not important to hear the voice of the guy next to me because his voice, which was pretty much would be at my same tone and frequency level, is not threatening. It's actually quite the opposite. And so if it's not threatening, yet my system has detected a threat, my system is saying, hang on, anything not threatening, I need to just ignore it for right now because that's obviously not where the threat's coming from, and I've detected a threat. So background noise, low frequency, low tone background noise is very often where a threat comes from. Right? Let's say, we're walking through the jungle, we're picking berries, and we hear 200 meters behind us, some leaves or whatever, twig cracks. Those are low tone, low frequency background noises. That's where the threat comes from, right? That's evolutionarily, that's where the threat comes from. Someone's stalking up on you to attack you. They're not doing it making a bunch of loud whatever. Maybe they also doing kind of like a war cry type of thing, but that's getting at a different frequency pitch as well. At a different, that's not technical language, but that's getting at a different realm of the bandwidths for our purposes and for this kind of chronic anxiety state where it's not really correlated to actual reality, right? When you're anxious and it's not because there's an actual threat around you, that's when it becomes a pathology, when it becomes kind of chronically the state. That's when we really need to work with it, right? If there actually is a threat, we want your system to respond in a threat detection slash threat mitigation type of way. So what we need to do then is reattenuate your system, in this case, via your inner and middle ear structures, which obviously interact directly with your nervous system, in this case, directly with your vagus nerve. We need to get your inner and middle ear structures to be more attenuated to those quote unquote cues of safety. If they can become more attenuated to the cues of safety, then they become less fixated on the cues of threat, and that sends a signal to your nervous system saying, hey, we hear cues of safety, we're receiving them now, and we're starting to realize we actually are safe. And so the SSP, the Safe and Sound Protocol, can help kind of chaperone you through back up that hierarchy towards and ultimately to arrive at the social engagement system, that top level social engagement level of the hierarchy. So, what does the SSP actually look like? So, what the SSP is computer filtered music, and it could be any music. They, the system offers maybe 5 or 6 different options, kind of like Disney music to pop music to classical music, a couple of different option playlists. It could be any noise really, and that's put through a filter, which is a very specifically titrated filter, which undulates and fluctuates along the tonal and frequency bandwidths, both stimulating and exercising your inner and middle ear structures to become more attenuated to the frequency and tonal bandwidths of safe. By doing so over the course of the 5 hours, it's a 5 hour initial protocol. Hopefully your nervous system learns to receive those cues of safety. And so it's a 5 hour protocol, 1 hour a day, 5 days in a row. And that in a row is really important. It can't be, an hour on Monday and then 30 minutes on Wednesday and then on Saturday another, whatever. It has to be pretty tightly packed together so that it really is training your nervous system in this way. If there's too much time in between each session, your system kind of resets back to its own default. So that's the standard, is an hour a day, 5 days in a row for the main protocol. After you complete the main protocol, it's called the core protocol. Then you have access to what's called the balance, which is a moderately filtered protocol. So after your system has been trained and attenuated with the core, with the highest level of filtration, then you can use the balance to almost send cues of safety, right? Because it's only mildly stimulating slash exercising your system, your inner and middle ear structures, and therefore your nervous system. And so once you complete the main protocol, then you can use this to kind of remind, quote unquote, your system of that safe place. It can just deliver some very gentle cues of safety to your nervous system and use those either to prime your day. You know, I myself have done this. I've had clients who've done this. You know, you're just going to start the day with 8, 10, 15, whatever minutes of listening to the balance section of the SSP. The core can only be done once every 2, really more like 3 months. If it's done too often, it has kind of counterproductive effects for your nervous system. And you need special headphones. I use these. They're just $20 from Amazon. You can also buy, and if you end up signing up with me, I send you the link for these. You can also buy headphones from Unite, which is the company which is the name of the company that provides the SSP. What the headphones need to be are over the ears, so big over the ears ones like this. So they're fully over the ears, and these are very simple. They're non noise canceling and non bass boosting. And the reason that's important is if it's bass boosting, it's going to interrupt, it's going to mess with the very specific frequency and tonal bandwidth filtration process which is happening. And the non noise canceling is because we want your ears to be attenuating to those cues of safety coming through the headphones, but also able to hear background noise and to distinguish from it and differentiate from it and to be largely indifferent to it. Because if you're not indifferent to the background noise, that means you're basically detecting it for a threat. And that's exactly the state we want to get out of. Um, that's all for the logistics. The cost of the SSP with me is 350. That's a year subscription. So you'll have it from whatever date you sign up, you'll have a full 12 months access to it. You can do it as much or as little as you want. That'll give you about 5 opportunities if it's appropriate for you, but not for not everyone is it appropriate to do the core so frequently. But if it's appropriate for you, then you can do up to 5, maybe even 6 times of the core protocol. And then throughout the year, after you've done the initial core, you can use the balance whenever it feels like you want it or it's appropriate or you need it. You know, let's say you have a kind of nerve-wracking meeting coming up in 30 minutes and you want to ground yourself a little bit beforehand. You know, listen to 10 minutes of the SSP if you got the time, the balance protocol, and bring yourself back down. It's a really legitimate and effective way to use it. So those are the generalities of the SSP. Um, if you're interested, reach out. You can reach out to me via my website. There's a contact form at the bottom of each page or a contact page. Yeah, and I look forward to potentially working with you.